I posted some pictures of some jars of beans and grains that were pre-mixed and pre-measured. And a lot of you guys had some questions, so I just wanted to walk through the whole process of what I did so that you could get some ideas for doing it yourself. I originally did this because I was going to go stay in a cabin, and I didn't want to take all of these jars of beans and all my jars of grains and all of my spices. So I thought of this idea of just pre-mixing only what I needed so I didn't have to take too much to the cabin with me. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to do half a cup of split yellow peas. So for the most part, when I do beans, I don't really pre-plan what I'm gonna do. I kind of just pull out all of my favorite spices. All of these spices here go really well with beans. And I just do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So I'll walk you through that. But the exception to that rule is gonna be this first recipe. This is a split yellow curry that is on groundleaf.co right now. So I'm not going to list out all of the spices that I'm gonna put in there. I have pre-measured them, and I'm just gonna put them right here in the jar so that now when I'm ready to do that recipe, all I'm gonna do is take this jar, put it in the pressure cooker, add some liquid, and pressure cook it, and it'll be ready to go. Just put the lid on that. So next, I'm gonna do some green lentils. And so for this, I don't really have a plan. What I typically do is for every half a cup of a dry bean, I do about half a teaspoon of salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And you'll see that even though I'm not going off of a recipe, I do usually still use measuring spoons because it helps me just have kind of a memory of how much I've put in there. And usually as I go along, I kind of put them in different spots so I can see how much there is, but also I can see what I've done if I get distracted and get pulled away and then I have to come back and pick up where I left off. So I'm gonna just do, a lot of times with beans, what I do is I start with like half a teaspoon of onion powder if I've done half a teaspoon or half a cup of beans. So I'm gonna do half a teaspoon of onion powder. I'm gonna do a quarter teaspoon of garlic and a quarter teaspoon of smoked paprika. So that's kind of the base of a lot of my recipes for beans. That's not a hard and fast rule. You can change it up. You can do equal amounts of all three of those. It's totally fine. So then I think I'm just going to add a little bit something extra to this. I'm going to go back to half a teaspoon. I think I'm going to put some oregano in here. So half a teaspoon of oregano. And then I feel like I need some kind of chili powder. So I'll probably just do like the chili powder medium. And we'll get that in there. And then maybe a quarter teaspoon of basil. So I think that's pretty good for lentils, so I'm going to leave that. And just put the lid on. So for the rest of these beans, I'm going to still stick with half a cup. So I'm first going to do cranberry beans. And then I'm going to do some black beans. Oopsie. And some scarlet runner beans. So these scarlet runner beans are cool. They're just a really big bean. It's one of the reasons I really like to cook beans from dry, because you can try out some beans that you don't normally find canned, like these yellow eye. These are really cool. There's so many cool different beans out there. If you go to ranchogordo.com, I believe, you'll see so many cool heirloom beans. So I'll do half a cup of each of these. So the reason I do half a cup usually of beans is typically half a cup of beans is about equal to 1 can of beans. So if you're used to the quantity of a can of beans, half a cup of dried beans should give you about the same quantity. You have a lot of flexibility when you cook with dry beans, because if you wanted just a little bit more, you could do 2/3 of a cup, you could do 3/4 of a cup, and you can keep going. You can go all the way up to, you don't want to fill your pressure cooker more than halfway, I believe, with beans, because they do triple in size, so you want to make sure that you leave room for them to do that. So the reason that I'm doing these beans in a bigger jar versus how I did these beans, how it fills up the jar, is because of 2 reasons. One, I want to soak my beans. Soaking beans is not required. You can totally just start cooking them right now. I like to soak them because they cook much more evenly and they cook much faster. So that's a reason I do that. So because I'm gonna soak these, I put them in a bigger jar. So now when I'm ready to soak, I'm just gonna fill this jar with water. For half a cup of beans, this should be plenty of room for them to expand. I'm probably gonna come in and stir them around a couple times while they're soaking to make sure that the water gets all the way into all the beans. And then I'm also, when I do all of the seasoning for these beans, I'm gonna put them in a separate jar. So I'm gonna use this jar and this jar. This jar is a little bit easier because of the wider mouth. It's easier to just kind of put seasonings in there, but it is a little bit of a tight fit for this type of a jar. This one fits perfectly. It's just a little bit smaller of an opening. So, if you think it's gonna be too hard to get your aim in there, you might wanna do something bigger. Both of these are really great, but you don't have to go buy any specialty jars for any of this. You can just keep saving when these all empty out. This is an empty one of these guys here. Just save it, and this fits right in there too. So anytime you have an empty, then you can just use this as your spice mixture. And you don't even have to make sure that you're using jars big enough to keep the spices in the jar. This is a recently emptied bigger spice jar, and it's not gonna fit in there. But I can either just label these so that I know they go together, or I can put a rubber band around them so I know they go together. So you have a lot of options, because also if you wanted to do more beans than just a half a cup, if you're feeding more people or you want to do some batch cooking, cook just like one time so you have like 3 or 4 meals, you could fill this with beans and then just dump this into something else later to soak. Like you could dump it into just a bigger glass bowl that has enough room for them to expand. You don't have to soak in the jar that you're storing them in. So I am going to, I think what I'll do first, like I said before, I pretty much always do a half a teaspoon of salt for every half a cup. So I think I'm just gonna do that in each of these jars. And then I'm going to, so let's see, I've got the yellow eyes here. I think the yellow eyes, I like to keep it a little bit kind of simple. So I'm going to do that base I told you of onion powder, half a teaspoon garlic powder, quarter teaspoon, I don't know what I just said, quarter teaspoon of smoked paprika. So that's just what I'm going to start with. And then I think I'm just gonna do like a teaspoon of Italian herbs and a teaspoon of chili 9000. Now this is gonna be tricky because this is a new bottle. So that should be pretty good. So I can go ahead and get this all locked up, drop it in. Black black beans can handle a lot of flavor. I mean, most beans can. But I think I'll do the same thing. Start with the onion, garlic, and smoked paprika. And then I'm gonna do, I really like this taco seasoning. It says chicken taco on it, but you can ignore that. There's no chicken in it. It's just a really good taco seasoning. And if you want to know any of the ingredients in any of these spices, you can go to groundleaf.co/penzeys, Penzeys, and it'll tell you what the ingredients are, so you can know what the ingredients of this chili powder is and compare it to the chili powder you have at home to know if maybe you need to add a little bit something more to get kind of the same flavor profile that I'm getting. So I'm gonna add some of the chicken taco. I think I'll do half a teaspoon. And then I always really like to do cumin, and I do the ground cumin with beans. It just gives it a really good flavor. And then I'll do a little bit of an herb. I think I did Italian last time, so I'll just do oregano this time. And a lot of times that's really just where my mind goes. You know, I did a little bit something different last time, so I'll do a little bit different this time. And then I think I'll do the chili 9000 again though. But still, I've been using, these last few have just been on the half a teaspoon measure. And I'll just kind of take a look, and I think that's about enough. It doesn't need too much to make it taste good. Get that in there with the black beans. Close it up. Now the scarlet runners, I really like. They're a nice big bean. So I'm gonna start with my 1 teaspoon measure. And I'm gonna go in with this Old World. There's a lot of stuff in it, a lot of good flavor in here. So let's get one nice big one of those. Let's go back to the Italian. The Italian is just so nice. It's a great blend. Do 1 teaspoon of that. And then maybe, like I said, the cumin has such a good flavor for beans. Let's put a little bit more this time since it's a bigger bean. A little bit of that. And then I think I'm gonna go back down to a half a teaspoon again for the onion, like I pretty much always do. Got the onion, and we'll do, what I think I'll do? I'll do the equal amount of garlic for this one. I'll skip the paprika because I got a lot of other flavors going on in there. And I'll just add a little bit more of like a chili powder medium, just for a little bit more chili powder. And that's not going to turn out to be spicy. If you want any of these to be spicier, you might want to add some crushed red peppers. Like a pinch of this would make it a little bit spicier. You can always put a little bit of cayenne. Whenever I put the cayenne in, it always gets really hot for me. So I haven't been doing that lately. So put that right in there. And then last, we've got the cranberry beans. So let's see. Let's just start with what I know. We'll do the onion powder, and then let's see, onion powder. Let's do some Italian, some cumin, let's do the chili 9000. So the chili 9000, I think it has oregano in it. So a lot of times I like to pair the chili that has the oregano with the Italian herbs just to get a little bit different of a mixture in there. And then let's do this lemon pepper. Again, it has the word chicken and fish on it, but those ingredients are not in here, so don't worry about that. But it's nice to put a little bit of acid in sometimes, so this lemon will be nice, and a little bit of black pepper. You don't want to cook with too much acid in your beans, particularly tomatoes. Like I would never cook these from dry with a can of tomatoes at the same time, because it's going to make them take a lot longer to cook. So what I would do is first cook the bean and then add in the tomatoes and cook it for a little bit longer. That's just the best way that works for me. And then because I was talking, I kind of forgot what I've been doing. So let's see, I can kind of look in here and get a feel. I've kind of just been dumping more than anything. I think that I need to probably put some, let's see, garlic. didn't do garlic yet, I know that. So we'll do a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic. Get that paprika back in here. I always use smoked because I like that little smokiness to the beans. It's really nice. And let's do a little bit, just a little bit of the old world. The last time I used it, I think I used a bigger quantity, but just a little bit this time. A little bit more of this chicken taco. Again, sorry for the word chicken. I did not name these. And then I think I'm almost out of this poultry. Again, with the chicken. The poultry is really nice. It has a lot of herbs in it. Again, you can go to my website to see exactly what's in it to compare it to your poultry if you have a poultry seasoning. This gives such a good flavor, but you need just a little bit. So I'm gonna just take about half of a 1/4 teaspoon, which would be about 1/8 of a teaspoon. It's so good, but it can kind of be overwhelming sometimes. So put that in there. And I think that's probably pretty good for that. Let's put this in here. And I think I used at least one of these every time. The only one I didn't show you using is the curry because I already had pre-measured it for the split yellow peas over here. But I did use it today. Okay, so now we've got all the beans. And I already pre-measured out the grains because that's not super exciting, but I've got brown rice, I have farro, I have basmati rice, I think, yeah, basmati rice, quinoa, put some of these over here, wild rice, and red rice. Put this over here. So the grains are easy. You can cook them completely plain the way that they are right now. They don't need anything. I always like to add salt, so my rule of thumb for salting grains is for every cup, these are all 1 cup portions, for every cup I do anywhere between half a teaspoon to a teaspoon, normally a little bit closer to the teaspoon side of things. So you can put just that and that's it, you're fine. You can also put just as much spices into the grain as you would in a bean. Like I have a Spanish rice recipe coming out soon. It's got like a lot of flavor in the rice itself. But when I do this kind of a setup, I like to keep the grains pretty neutral because I don't even know yet which bean I'm gonna set it up with. So I don't want to put too much spice in the grains and then mix them with a bean and then it just is too much. So the only exception to that is the farro. There's a farro recipe, groundleaf.co/farro, F-A-R-R-O, and I believe it's something like this. I think it's, and this time I can put the spices right in here because I'm not going to rinse this and I'm not going to soak it. So 1 teaspoon of Italian herbs, half a teaspoon of onion powder, and I think it says a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic. Doesn't matter, you can't mess this up, you know, just as long as you don't put too much, you're not gonna mess anything up. So then for that, for the salt, I usually take the 1 teaspoon and just do just a little bit under, so I don't fill it all the way. So that's ready. Now all the rest of these, I'm just gonna put salt. And the only exception to that is the quinoa, because the quinoa does need to be rinsed later. And I don't want to rinse it now because it's going to get all wet. Putting it in a jar, it would get, you know, kind of moldy or something. So I'm not going to put any seasoning in the quinoa now. I just have to remember after I rinse it that I need to put the salt in it. And the reason that you're going to rinse your quinoa is because it has an outer coating on it called saponin, and you want to rinse that off because it can give a bitter taste and you don't want that. So this is the brown rice. Do a little under a teaspoon. We've got the basmati. Got the red rice and the wild rice, and that is all my salt. Okay. So now putting it all together, like, so what I usually do, so this is the one that has the recipe on the website, the yellow split peas. A lot of times I cook that with either the farro and with the spices I just put in the farro. It's a nice combination. A lot of times I just do brown rice. I usually do short grain brown rice. This is longer grain. I'm out of short grain now. And so cooking all of your grains is a little bit more of an exact science than cooking beans. Like the farro, for 1 cup of farro, I put 2 cups of water. And there's recipes for white rice on the website, brown rice, farro, and quinoa. There is not one yet for wild rice. I've been testing it at 28 minutes and it's been working really well. Red rice, again, I don't have an exact time right now. My guess is it's gonna fall somewhere between a brown rice and a wild rice in its cooking time. So I'm gonna do somewhere between, maybe 22 minutes to 25 minutes for that. And the beans, I don't have a cooking chart for beans on ground leaf. And that's because the cooking times of beans can vary a lot. So it does matter if you have soaked your beans or not. It matters how old your beans are. If your beans are really old, it can get to the point where they kind of just seem like they're never going to cook no matter how many times you put them back under pressure. Also, your elevation matters. If you're in a higher elevation, you're going to want to add a little bit more time. But so when you're ready to cook these, if you came back and you said, oh, I really wanted these for dinner tonight and I didn't soak them, then I would just Google yellow eye beans pressure cooker time, and then you'll get some kind of charts. And usually those charts, they'll say, they'll usually have times for soaked and unsoaked, and they'll usually have like a time frame. So it might say, soaked is between 6 and 11 minutes. I always seem to have to add a few minutes to whatever's the highest side. So if it says 11, I usually do more like 14 or 15. But if you did soak them, so if you soaked these black beans, you could just Google soaked black bean pressure cooker time, and you can kind of start figuring it out like that. And then when it comes to pairing them with the different grains, they're all going to interchange really nicely together. So the next thing that I would do, I'm not going to do this on video, but the next thing that I would do is I would make some of the spices that are on, sauces that are on the ground leaf website. I almost always at the beginning of the week make a chipotle sauce and the nutty Parmesan. So what I would do, if I made for dinner, if I made black beans and brown rice, I would cook them both, usually individually. If you want to cook them at the same time, if you only have one pressure cooker, then you can use the pot and pot method that there's 2 different tutorials for on the ground leaf website. And basically what the pot and pot method is that you would take your outer bigger pot for your pressure cooker. You would put in the beans in the bottom. And the reason that I always say to put the beans in the bigger pot is because if they didn't cook all of the way, you can pull out the rice and put these back under pressure really easily, or you can just saute them until they're cooked to your liking right in the pot. So you're gonna put the beans in the bottom, you're gonna put a trivet, and then you're gonna put in a smaller bowl where you'd put the grains inside the smaller bowl. So these, these ones are the ones I've been using for all of my pot and pot cooking. It's a set of 3. They're on Amazon. If you go to groundleaf.co/store, you'll get a link to where these are found. They're very expensive, but the price the other day when I looked had gone down by $10. So you might want to go check those out. The reason that I use a flat bottom stainless steel bowl versus like a glass bowl like this is because when I was recipe testing, doing grains with this method, they were never really cooking in this kind of center part in the middle. And so I wanted to find something that was more emulated the shape of the Instant Pot that comes with it. And so this seems to work a lot better. Like I said, they are a little expensive, but if you have an Asian store, Indian store near you, they'll sell ones like this. This is a smaller one. This one was only $5. I have a bigger one too. It's dirty right now. I think it was more like $7. I got these at a store called 99 Ranch Market, I believe. So if you have an Asian store near you, you can find something like this a lot cheaper. Otherwise, you can go to the Amazon route. So if you want to cook your beans and grains at the same time, there is a way to do that. Or you can do one pressure cooker with the beans, one with the grains, and combine them later. And then, so I'd put that in a bowl when you're ready to cook, serve it up, and put any kind of veggies you want. Chop up some romaine lettuce, put in some spinach, put in some kale. You can either cook the kale or leave it raw. You can put in tomatoes and avocados and carrots and mushrooms. There's so many things you can choose from. And then I would drizzle on like the chipotle sauce and sprinkle on some nutty Parmesan. And you know, there's other sauces I would use too that are on ground leaf right now. Like I would do maybe the tomato basil hummus, or the basil pesto was really good. So if you get a few sauces at the beginning of the week and then add in some other veggies, you know, this is easy to do. You got a whole meal. And in the future, I'm going to be coming out with a full guide for how to put together bowls like that. It's probably going to come closer to May, so keep an eye out for that. And I hope that you found this helpful.